is Luke Pelletier, and we will be talking about botulism today for disease and society. So let's begin. So overview, it's actually not even the bacteria itself, but it's a bacterial toxin caused by the bacteria Clostridium botulinum. And actually this bacteria survives in low O2. It's an anaerobic bacteria and only in warm temperatures. It's a gram-positive spore-forming. It's a rod-shaped bacteria as well, and it's actually commonly found in wet environments. So like decomposing plants, actually in nature kind of found in the intestinal linings of insects and in decomposing soil as well. It's a very rare virus, but also very virus. It's a very rare toxin, but it's also very, very lethal. And so this bacteria doesn't usually make people sick. But when it does, because it can be activated in certain environments. So even if it's in the intestinal linings, it has to be a certain temperature and it actually has to meet certain conditions before that bacteria starts releasing spores. And those spores, again, that the toxin starts attacking your body, and then bad things start happening. And it's actually one of the most lethal toxins in nature. Less than 10 nanograms of it can be lethal to a human. So it's a pretty nasty thing to deal with. But again, very, very rare that you see this in nature, and even more rare that you see this in humans. The first recording we find of it is in Germany. 13 people got sick, 6 died after eating a local delicacy, which was pig stomach filled with blood sausage. Does not sound yummy at all. The German physician there, Justinus Kerner, researched it and concluded that it was an anaerobic bacteria, and actually saw that it was a toxin that was caused in this, um, doing different experiments with pigs and ham extracts and stuff like that, and actually gave it the name botulism with the botulinus, which actually came from the Latin word botulus, which was the Latin word for sausage. So just a fun fact there. Outbreaks were centered around meat and fish. Again, because those were the things that humans were ingesting that were poorly cooked, and maybe these animals weren't already infected with the bacteria. Again, that bacteria had been growing in them in the anaerobic environment, and so when you ingest it, now it has all that room to release the spores. So, um, again, they found out in 1904. 1904 was the first outbreak from non-meat or fish products, because usually the consensus before 1904 was that it was actually just meat and fish that contained botulism. And so it was actually a picnic that had canned white beans, and these canned white beans caused a botulism outbreak in people. And so when the canned industry boomed in the 20th century, this caused a lot of regulations to be put in place. Again, because you don't want people dealing with botulism. You don't want like a 50% chance of you taking a can off the store and it being infected with the bacteria, the botulus bacteria, botulinum bacteria. Sorry, butchering that. Cool. Another fun fact: research in World War II as a bioweapon discontinued that research, but actually moved it to research it on its effects on the muscles as how to develop antitoxins against it. So actually, it continues today to be one of the most researched toxins to be for its effects on the body, and trying to figure out how to deal with paralytic muscles and stuff like that for people who are paralyzed in certain ways, and how to get them to have fully functioning muscle groups. And they use this toxin to do that. So that's a pretty cool thing that I learned. It is through contact transmission, and actually through direct ingestion of it through the mouth or through cuts on the skin, that the bacteria can get in through. So it's not an airborne. It's not an airborne bacteria. You don't see people coughing, and you'll just get it from, you have to stand 6 feet away. It has to be through direct ingestion. Again, this is through eating meat. This is through eating canned foods that are infected with this. This is how you get it. That's how you commonly will get it, is through that. Um, Yeah, as we said, anaerobic bacteria, and actually it's in nature naturally, and nature is its reservoir. Again, it can be in insects, usually in warm, decomposing environments where there's low O2. So usually underneath the soil, decomposing animals, stuff like that. Um, I found out a pretty cool thing about this, which was there's actually different types of botulism. So usually the one that we think about with botulism is foodborne botulism, and this is stuff like you see in the picture. It's going to be canned foods. It's going to be stuff usually that people can buy themselves, and you'll see this usually people out in the country or people who don't like store-bought stuff. They'll buy or that sort of stuff, or it could be people who like their food to last a while longer. They usually store these in warm areas, and they'll can them by themselves. And those two factors, along with the food being infected with the botulism um, bacteria, allows that botulism to ferment, to grow, and mature, so that when you eat it or ingest it later, it's now inside your body. It can then start attacking your body with the toxins that it produces. As you can see from that picture down below, ingest it and starts inhibiting the nerves and muscle can contract. We'll get into the symptoms in a little bit. Um, excuse me. Another type of botulism is wound botulism, and this is pretty self-explanatory. It's basically mostly drug users is when this occurs, and it's when you get when they inject themselves with needles that are infected with botulism, and the botulism gets through the cut in the skin. It can also go through, again, if you're in an accident, just the botulism getting through the skin through wounds. Infant botulism is when infants ingest it and actually infects the intestinal linings. So this is in their stomach primarily. Usually you'll see botulism start in people's faces. In infants, it's in their stomach. Kind of adult intestinal toxemia is kind of the same thing, but in adults. Infants it usually causes through them ingesting honey. Um, so that's a pretty interesting thing. And then latrogenic botulism is the most controversial one. And botulism, I just found this out again through researching it, that people actually use the toxin to soften and take the wrinkles out of their face because it kind of softens the skin because of its paralytic nature. And latrogenic botulism is when you actually inject yourself with too much of the toxin, and you start and yeah, you get infected with it, and it starts paralyzing your face. So um, don't inject yourself with a toxin, I guess, is the main point of that. But that was pretty interesting that there's basically 5 types of botulism that you can get, that you can see. Symptoms of botulism. Some of the common symptoms pretty early on can be attributed to other diseases as well, and that's usually why diagnosis of the bacteria is pretty hard early on, because you'll see droopy eyes, diarrhea, vomiting, stuff like that, malaise, fatigue, where it's like you can't really pinpoint on one virus or one disease or one illness like botulism. Um, Now, as you go on, paralysis can occur and respiratory failure if left untreated. And as you can see, this boy right here is infected with botulism, and you can see it's infected his face. Again, you ingest it, it gets seeped in through the neck area and the face. His eyes are droopy. He can't really move his face. He looks like he's sleepy. Again, this is the sleepiness. The effect of sleepiness is because, again, that toxin is attacking those muscles and attacking those neurotransmitters in those muscles, and it's actually disabling them. So you can't move your muscles anymore. That's where you look really sleepy. It's getting hard to move. Again, that toxin, if left untreated, can actually reach your respiratory tract, and that's where you see this death occur, is when people just stop breathing because it attacks their muscles. They're not allowed to breathe. Diagnosis: they do have an antitoxin. It was developed in the 20th century. Before the antitoxin was developed, they had a 50% death rate. Now it's down to 4%. Even with the antitoxin, though, it can take up to 2 weeks for 2 weeks up to 2 months. So 2 weeks to 2 months for you to recover fully from that. So it's a pretty slow process. So again, botulism is no joke. It's pretty rare. But again, once you get it and you get the antitoxin, if you recover, the recovery process takes a while. So it may sometimes put you on ventilator stuff if it attacks your respiratory tract in that way. And the prevalence, usually less than 1,000 cases a year in recent years. And actually, again, 5 or 4% death rate. In 2017, only 182 cases were actually reported, with 77% being infant botulism. So actually not foodborne infant, and that's through ingestion of honey. So honey, especially through locally produced honey, was infected with botulism, and so that's why you see that. But again, no deaths from that, and it's a pretty rare disease. So you'll see, again, 100 to a few hundred of those. But at the end of the day, it's a pretty rare disease. So yeah, and thank you so much for listening to me, and I hope you all have a wonderful day. All right, bye-bye.